Music theory using OneNote. Scale degree chords conversion to an absolute mode chord numbering system. In other words, when discussing music with other musicians, they might still be using that antiquated scale degree numbering system to tell you what chords to play within a particular key. And we want to be able to convert that somewhat quaint system that was, they used back in the 1700s and whatnot, to the more sophisticated modal center system, kind of like the Nashville number system, which obviously makes a lot more sense. So how do we do that conversion? That's what we'll do here. So get ready and some coffee, because although we're playing with just one note, it's a beautiful note. Not required to, but if you have access to it and would like to follow along, we're currently in the OneNote file of the modal node system, MNS presentation 1170, Excel scale degree chords conversion to absolute mode chord numbering. One of a few presentations over here, which we plan on adding plenty more to shortly. Also noting that in this presentation, we could spend all of our time on the music theory side of things, but we also have another presentation by the same name and number as presented here, where we build these tables in Excel, practicing both our Excel skills and music skills, noting that Excel skills actually are music skills. At least that's what I think. Not everyone agrees with me, but honestly, Excel is the best music theory worksheet that you will ever find. Anyways, let's go on down to the fretboard to get an idea of what we're talking about here. Whenever we're discussing with other musicians, such as bandmates, for example, there's always a communication issue, communication being difficult because we're trying to communicate concepts of music, right? And we have to have some kind of theory in order to do that. Now, unfortunately, the theory that had taken hold in the 1700s and no one kind of fixed it was this scale degree thing, which makes us basically renumber the system, which would be similar to us living on the planet, but every time we start living in a different location, we renumber the continents. We don't want to do that, but we also want to be able to communicate with people that do that. So there's two main problems when trying to play in a band or on a particular key. If someone says, hey, we're in the key of A minor, then we have to think, okay, well, first of all, what are the collection of notes that I'm going to be dealing with? Usually there's only 7 notes within any particular collection, possibly trimming it down to 5 if you want to go to pentatonic. But in Western music, we say 7 notes. Then, once we know the collection of notes, we have a question of which chords are we going to be playing off of within those collection of notes. That's the point that we're going to focus in on this time. Because in the scale degree system, what they want to do is rename the name here from a 1 to a 6. I mean, a 6 to a 1. That's what the scale degree system will do. And what we would like to do is say, no, don't rename it typically, because that's just going to make it more difficult for me to basically move around the continents when you keep changing the names of the continents. So that's the problem we want to look into. How can we convert back and forth? The argument here also being that a modal center system is much more clear. And you'll be able to see that by saying, hey, look, if I tell someone in a modal centered format what we're playing, even if the other person doesn't normally use a modal center system, they're used to a scale degree system, they will still easily know what I'm talking about. Whereas the vice versa isn't true, right? If someone doesn't know, like the Dorian mode or whatnot, there's nothing you can do from a scale degree standpoint to get it through their head other than to switch to a modal center system, to say, oh, we're going to be playing as though we're playing in this major key, and this is the 2 of it. That should lead us to the conclusion, hey, wait a second, maybe the way the normal convention is working is not the easiest convention, right? It doesn't mean that bandmate is stupid. It means that, right, they could learn more, of course, right? But what it means is the system we're using isn't the most efficient system. We should use the most efficient. This isn't like a little clique group where we're trying to exclude people by making the language confusing. Do you know how to say shivulets? Do you know how to say shit, right? That's not how it works. We're trying to expand the ease so more people can learn it. That's what we do here, at least. All right, so let's do our analogy. We're going to say that the fretboard is the map of the territory. There are only 7 destination locations on it, which I'm going to be comparing to the continents of the United States, or of the world, of the entire world. You might say, hey, look, there's 12 actual locations on the fretboard, but no, there's only 7 destination locations. There's 12 actual locations, including what we're calling the oceans, the non-destination locations that we only go through to get to the destination locations typically. That's how it basically works. And then if we take our viewpoint from space, we note that the world is spinning, similar to the fretboard, shifting around. We imagine it has 12 different shifts or viewpoints that we can look at from our point in space. We, of course, need to name what viewpoint we're looking at so I can find where the United States is, where Europe is on the globe. But once I find where the United States is, where Europe is on the globe, then I can use the same numbering system. I can still just call it, hey, that's the United States. Hey, that's Europe. I'm not going to renumber the United States and Europe because I'm looking at it from a different perspective in space as the world is spinning around. That's going to be the analogy. So how do we name what angle we're looking at the fretboard from in space? We have 12 keys, 1 through 12. So if I say that it's in the key of C, then I'm basically saying the collection of notes around the key of C. I'm just naming the 7 notes, the 7 continents that are going to be organized around the key of C when I'm looking at it from that perspective, when the world is at that point of angle from my point in space. And then once I'm there, I'm no longer going to be naming all of the continents by the letters of the alphabet, by the note names, but rather by the continent names, which don't change as we go through all the 12 viewpoints. So Ionian, Phrygian, Dorian, Mixolydian. That's going to be what we would like to do. Okay, so then if we have labeled that as the C, or that as the collection of notes, then the next problem is what's going to be basically our chord progression. What's going to be the modal center? What's going to be our chord progression? So let's say we're playing in the collection of notes that we're naming as the C collection of notes based on the major scale, but we're going to be playing in A minor, or the 6th of that collection of notes. Well, then the easy way to say that is to say, hey, look, we're doing the collection of notes around the key of C, C major if you like, but we're making the tonic the 6th. And when I start to label actual chords that we're going to construct around it, the easy thing to do would be to keep that the 6th. So we're going to play the 6 and then the 2 and then the 3 possibly, right? I'm going to play the 6, 2, 3. That way, I don't have to rename the continents on the globe. But that's not what currently happens typically. What happens is people say, no, we have to use a scale degree system, converting this 6 to a 1. So if I convert that to the 1, then I have to build my chords off of that as the 1. So see how that's going to cause a problem, because that makes me remember all of the points on our system with a different numbering system. That's why the Nashville number system looks like a hack when it says, hey, look, we're just going to play like we're playing in the key of C, but we're not. We're actually playing around the tonic of A minor with the same set of notes in the key of C, and we're just going to keep the numbers the same. So it sounds like a hack, but it's not actually a hack. That's the proper way to do it. That's the way that actually makes sense, right? You don't want to number it. You don't want to say it like you're playing the key of C. You're going to say, I'm doing the collection of notes around the key of C, and then we're going to be playing with the tonic is the 6, which is the A, and then I'm going to list the chords that I play based on the same numbers. We're going to do an Aeolian, a Dorian, and a Phrygian. People don't like Latin names. Okay, we'll just number them 6, 2, 3, right? Instead of a 1, 4, 5, it's a 6, 2, 3. All right, so but that people are going to call it a 1, 4, 5. Now notice if someone calls it a 1, 4, 5, and I don't know all of my modes, even if I'm using a scale degree system, I'm still going to have problems, right? My bandmates aren't going to be able to understand because they only know it from the perspective of the major scale, right? So if you renumber it to the minor scale, they're going to have a problem. What are you going to have to do? You're going to have to say what the Nashville music system people said. They said, hey, well, that's okay. Look, just pretend we're playing in the key of C, but then we're going to make the 6 the root, and then we're going to play a 2-3, a 6-2-3. Those are the chords that we'll play off of, which you already know because you know the chords related to the key of C, or that's the first thing most people often learn. See, whereas if you do it the other way, if you just say that's the way I always say it, then even if someone doesn't know a modal-centered system, they can still catch it. They still understand it. So if I say, hey, look, I'm playing around the collection of notes for the key of C, but the tonic is going to be the Aeolian or the sixth, and we're going to be playing in the chord progression of a 6-2-3 as related to the key of C. Or we should be able to say Aeolian, Dorian, Phrygian chords, right? Those are the chords we're going to play, but we'll get to that later. So that's the idea. And so even if someone does a scale degree system, they can get that. They're going to roll their eyes at you and say, oh, you're unsophisticated. What do you have, a mullet over there? Probably this guy probably has a mullet. He's an idiot, right? But no, that's the right way to say it. You just not saying the right shibboleths for the cool kids, right? But you're actually doing it the more clean way. That's the cleaner way to do it. That's the way that makes sense. All right. So how do we do the conversions then? So if we say we're in the Ionian, that's the major scale, then we have the numbering system of 1 through 7. 1 through 7 continents, 1 through 7 points, and so we can label those points, and we usually say we're going to build a chord off of those points. We'll talk about chord creation in the future. I have a whole nother rant on chord creation that I think would be better. Again, they're using stuff that's more, we're using things that are more difficult. Anyway, so if someone says it's a 1-4-5, that's the standard kind of blues thing. We start to remember that the 1-4-5 in relation to the key of C build major triads, right? So that's nice because now I'm starting to remember basically what kind of chords are created off of each of the notes related to the major key system. Now, what I'd like to do is make that permanent. So from a modal system, I'm still going to use the major scale as my collection of notes or my numbering system. So that's the key where I'm going to basically refer back to. That's my Rosetta Stone. The numbering system is based on the Ionian mode. Remember that the Ionian mode from a theory standpoint isn't better than any other mode. They're all intimately related. You can derive any of them from any other one, but we have to base the numbering system based on something. Something has to be absolute number one. Might as well do it on the Ionian because that's historically the one that's been the most used in Western music. So we'll do that. So, but then what if we go to the Dorian? So now we're in the Dorian. Now the Dorian's not the second most used mode. The second most used mode, of course, is the minor scale, otherwise known as the Aeolian. But we're going to go through each of them so we get an idea. So you possibly will hear Dorian from time to time, but it's not as common as the major or the minor, otherwise known as Ionian or the Aeolian. All right, so the Dorian is like a minor mode. It's used fairly often. And so if I say that we have a 1-4-5 in the key of Dorian, someone says that, it's like, oh man, what does that mean? So we're going to go down here and say, okay, well, I see there's a D. So I'm in D. Now the D doesn't mean it's Dorian. This happens to be a D Dorian, but the D means that's the note name and it's a Dorian. Okay, so if I know my modes, I can say, well, I know that the Dorian is the 2, and if I know the Dorian is the 2, then I know that it's going to be one modal half step back to get to the relative major. See, so if I'm on the 2, I know it's going to be one relative modal half step back. So if I know my fretboard or if I know my shape from that node, I'll be able to see, oh, I can go back to here and there's my C, and that's going to be my major key, right? So that's the major key, which allows me to know, in essence, the collection of notes. But the only way to do that is to basically know either the intervals or the shape from the point of the Dorian. We talked about that last time. Now we want to talk about the problem of when someone says they're playing a 1-4-5. So it's like, okay, now I know that all of the collection of notes that we're in. But when they say 1-4-5, they're converting this Dorian, which is normally a 2, to a 1, right? So now they're saying this is going to be a 1-4-5 in the Dorian. But see how that makes me renumber the system. I don't want to do that. I still want to see this as the 2. And I can build everything off it as the 2. You might say, well, you can't do that because you're trying to build a chord off of the 2. And to build a chord, you got to take the 1, 3, 5 of the scale, which we're going to assume is either Dorian or minor because it's a minor chord. But again, that's another problem, right? You don't need, that's not the best way to do it. What we're really building is the same collection of notes in the key of C, and we're taking every other note. So it would actually be easier even to say, how do you build a chord? You take modal whole steps. You take every other note, right? And so, but we'll talk more about that later. But we can easily build into the current system a major triad and a minor triad. So the reason this makes more sense is because if I keep it as a 2, I know that the 2 is a minor chord because that's what people just memorize. Why? Because they memorize that the 1, 4, 5 of the major key are the majors, the 2, 3, 6 are minor, and the 7 is diminished. So I know that that 2 is a minor chord. I can just build a minor chord triad around it, at least. We should build a Dorian triad. We'll talk about that later, but it's a minor chord triad. And so I know that. But if you rename it the 1, then I don't know that. I have to say, oh, it's the 1, and the 1 is the Dorian, right? And then what if they go to the 4? Like if they go to an Aeolian, and they say that's the 5 or something, right? Then I have to know that the 5 is actually, the 6, or it's the Aeolian. So the numbering system doesn't work. The numbering system is way more confusing. So it would make a lot more sense to say, hey, look, can I convert this? Be easy to do because I know the Dorian is the 2. So they're going to call it the 1, and I'm going to call it the 2. I'm just going to keep it as the 2. And then I can see that there's how many modal half steps up? 1, 2, 3. 3 modal half steps to get to the 4. So if I'm on the 2, 3, 4, 5, 3 modal half steps to get to the 5, and then 1 more modal half step to get to the 6. So it's easy to convert, right? So if they say it's the 1, 4, 5 in the Dorian, I'm just going to say, okay, that 1 needs to be a 2, and then I go up 3 modal half steps, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the 6. Or I can say that this 1 is going to the 2 here, so it's up by 1. So the 4 and the 5 then also have to be symmetrical, going up by 1. So now I'm going to say it's the 2, 5, 6. So that's going to be important. Now also remember that the 1, 4, 5 is kind of special, or it's kind of nice in the scale degree conversions because, again, in the major key, those happen to be the major chords. You build major triads. We'll talk about chords later. In the minor key, it just happens to work out that those are the minors. So that's great too. The 1, 4, 5 become the minors when you're in the minor or Aeolian. Problem though, is that the other ones, the 2, 3, and the 6 don't work out great. The 2 becomes the diminished in the minor, and that's kind of weird. And it doesn't work at all when you get to any of the other modes, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian. They don't work at all because the numbering system's all messed up. So you have to figure out then which chords are major and minor. And the only way to really do that is either to memorize the numbers again in every mode, which is crazy, or to be able to code switch the numbers to the absolute mode system. So if I know that they give me the 1, 4, 5, and I know that the 4 right here is actually the Mixolydian mode, and I know the Mixolydian mode builds a minor chord, then that would work. But again, people don't like memorizing the modes, right? So people don't do that. So they just know the numbering system. So if you just know the numbering system, you don't want to change the numbers when you go, right? That's the problem. So now you could go the other way. Like, let's say that I was here and we are now talking to somebody else and they want it in a scale degree system. Now remember, I can talk to someone else and they will still know what I'm talking about, even if their normal thing is a scale degree system. So if I say, hey, look, we are going to be playing in the collection of notes of the key of C, of the major key of C. We're going to be using the tonic, however, the modal center of the Dorian, which is the 2, and then we're going to be playing a 2, 5, 6, right? We're going to be playing a 2, 5, 6. They will know what I'm talking about because even if they're in a scale-based system, they've memorized the related numbers related to the key of C in the scale degrees. So even if they're using a scale degree system, they might not be able to follow this because they haven't remembered the number system for the Dorian, right? Even though they think that's the sophisticated way to do it. They haven't memorized it. So that means that if you talk this way, you can talk to anybody. And if someone talks to you the other way, you can convert it, right? But if I needed to convert this, how would we do it? Well, the 2 would go down to the 1. So the Dorian is now the 1. And then it goes 2, 3, 4, 5. It's up 3. So that means the 1, 2, 3, 4 would go up to the 4, right? So the 1, 4, 5. Or you could say the 2 goes down by 1. And therefore the 5 and the 6 also go down by 1 to get to the 4 and the 5. All right, so then let's go to the Phrygian. So what if I do the Phrygian? Someone says, okay, we're going to be in E Phrygian. And we're like, oh, dude, E Phrygian? I never play in Phrygian, man. So, but I can see where an E is right there. And if I know that the Phrygian is the 3rd, the number 3 absolute modal number, then to get to the related major, one way I could do it is going to be 2 modal half steps back because it's the 3rd. So 1, 2. Now to visualize that, I need to be able to know my fretboard from the Phrygian to be able to see that it's 2 back, or 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps. We talked about that last time. I don't want to spend too much time on that here, but once I see that, oh, the collection of notes is, once again, of course, they all are, they're going to be in our example, around the key of C. Once I see the collection of notes is around the key of C, then I know my 7-note collection. And then the question is, well, how can I convert that to the numbering system that makes sense? I don't want to make that the 1. I want to keep that as the 3. So it's going to be easy. They're going to call it the 1. We're just going to call it the 3. What about the 4 and the 5 then? Well, the 4 and the 5 is 1, 2, 3 steps up from the 1. Therefore, if I start on the 3, it's going to be 3, 4, 5. 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 3 steps up. So it's going to be the 6. And then the next one's going to be the 7, right? So it's the 4, 5, 6, 7. Or this went up by 2 to get to 3. Therefore, the 4 and the 5 also have to go up by 2. So the 4 goes to 6, the 5 goes to 7, right? Now, and so what about the other way? What if I'm talking to someone and we want to play in Phrygian? So I'm going to use I want to use my terminology, which I can because they'll understand it, right? I'm just going to say, hey, look, we're playing around the collection of notes of the C major. We're going to have the tonic be the 3, which is the Phrygian, playing in the Phrygian mode, and we're going to be playing the 3, 6, 7. That's what we're going to build our chord off of. And if they use a scale degree system, they'll be able to do that, no problem. But what if they don't? What if they want to see it as Phrygian scale degree format? Well, then we can say, okay, the 3 is now going to be the 1, and then it was 3, 4, 5, 6, so it's 3 up, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we can convert back and forth, but really, you only really need to convert from a scale degree to the mode system. And that'll happen all the time because musicians kind of like to test each other out, it seems like sometimes, right? To see if you see what you know. So they're going to give you the least information you need to figure something out sometimes, right? And see if you can figure it out, right? So the least information they could give you is that we're playing in E Phrygian, okay? And then we have to figure out the collection of notes, and then we have to figure out, okay, you know, what does it mean? How am I going to build a major chord or a minor chord off of those notes? But my goal isn't to test you by confusing you. My goal is to say, I want you to be able to convert it to the easiest way possible so that communication is not to test the other person to see if they know what they're talking about or make them look dumb, but rather to be able to get everybody on the same page. And the scale degree system is clearly not the best system to do that. The modal center system is the best way to do that, particularly with a guitar, right? Maybe it's a little different with a piano. I don't know. I don't think so, but maybe. So let's go with a Lydian. Someone says they're in an F Lydian. What does that mean? Okay, so if I'm in an F Lydian, we're going to say there's a Lydian. I need to find the key, the major key. So now I know the Lydian is the 4. So I could go backwards or forwards. If we go backwards, I'm going to say, well, if it's the 4, it must be 3 modal half steps back. 1, 2, 3, right? 3 modal half steps back. Now, I would need to know the fretboard to be able to see that position. I could see that little square, and I know that's the Phrygian. Even if it was somewhere else, even if I was playing in a different key, that square would be the same, and the C would be in the same relative position. So if I don't know that, then I can use another way of doing it, right? I can do my intervals, or I can use the formula which we talked about last time. But so now we know that we're in the key of, or the collection of notes based on the perspective of the key of C. We're playing around the modal center of the Phrygian, which is the 4. So now I want to convert it from the 1, 4, 5 to the 1 is the 4. I know this is going to the up by 1, 2, 3. So 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's going to be the 7. And then we don't go to 8 because there's only 7 modes, only 7 continents, and they're in a circle in our space, right? So they're in a circle. So it goes back to 1. So we go around to 1. So the 1, 4, 5 in Lydian now is going to be, in a static numbering system, the 4, 7, 1. The 4, 7, 1. All right, what if we went the other way? So if I was to say, hey, I want to talk to someone else and say that we're in F Lydian, then what am I going to do? I'm going to say the nice way to say it is say, hey, look, we're using the collection of notes around the key of C, and we're going to be playing with the modal center of the Phrygian, the 4, and then we're going to be playing the 4, 7, 1 as an absolute system related to the major key. So that anybody can do that. Anybody will say, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I see what you're doing. Because, yeah, that's like, and the classic way people will present that is pretend we're playing in the key of C, but the center point is going to be Phrygian, and the numbers will then be 4, 7, 1, like we're playing in the key of C, right? Like it's a hack. But it's not a hack. This is the point. We need to change the paradigm. The other way is the antiquated way of doing it. The other way is the non-specific way of doing it. This is the better way of doing it. It's not that. So anyways, if we go 4 down to 1, we know that that's going to be a subtraction of 3. We also know that the 4, 5, 6, 7 is 3 up. So the 1, 2, 3, 4 would be 3 up this way. We could say it's 4 minus 3 to get to 1. Therefore, 7 minus 3 gets to 4. And 1 minus 3 gets to negative 2. But there's only 7 modes. So when I go into negatives, we go negative 2 plus 7 is 5, right? So we have to go around in a circle. Or you can count it on your fingers. Just go around in a circle when we count it on our fingers. Nothing wrong with counting on your fingers. That's sophisticated too. People say you can't count on your fingers or you're a loser. No, it's totally legitimate to count on your fingers. Okay? That makes you so you can see what's happening. Okay, so now we're going to say, what if someone says we're in the G Mixolydian? Okay, so we go, okay, so there's a G right here, here's a G right here, and I'm trying to see, what the collection of notes are, so I can say, well, if I know the Mixolydian is the 5, then I can say it's easier to go forward than backwards now. So I could say, well, it's going to be 5, 6, 7, and then back to 1. That means it's going to be 3 modal half steps forward, 1, 2, 3, right? 3 modal half steps forward. Now, if I don't know my pattern from a G, that Mixolydian with an X, the 5, could be anywhere, right? If I wasn't in the key of C, the whole pattern would shift up relative. So it would be, so if I know the pattern, and I know the pattern from that point, then I'll be able to find it anywhere. But if I don't know the pattern, I can do it with scale degrees or intervals, modal ranges, right? We talked about that last time. But once I'm like, okay, now I'm in the key of the collection of notes of the key of C, the modal center is the 5, in this case, which is the G, how can I renumber the 1, 4, 5? Well, the 1, 4, 5, the 1 is now the 5. And then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, so it goes up by 3, so 5, 6, 7, and then it goes to 1 because we only have 7 points, 7 continents, so then the next one is going to be 2, of course. So if they say they're going to play the 1, 4, 5 in the Mixolydian, that does not mean, by the way, all major chords, right? Because the 1, 4, 5 are no longer the major chords. It's going to be the Ionian, which builds a major chord, and then the 4 is going to be, wait a sec, it's not the Ionian, it's the Mixolydian that builds a major chord, and then the 4 is representing the Ionian, which is a major chord, but the 5 is the 2, which is the Dorian, which is a minor chord, right? So that, and this is a problem in like the blues, for example, because in the blues, it's really confusing. People are talking like relative to the major key, but they're really playing like in the Mixolydian key. But if you say you're in the Mixolydian key, then it's kind of weird to go to the 1-4-5 and stuff, because you're actually playing, you know, in the same, like, parallel construction instead of in the same diatonic key. But we'll talk about that later. I don't want to get into the weeds on that right now. But if we then go the other way, if I was to say we're in G Mixolydian, the easy, nice way to say it is to say, hey guys, we're using the collection of notes around the C major, and we're going to be having the modal center, which is the Mixolydian, the 5. So the G Mixolydian is going to be our modal center, and we're going to be playing chords constructed around the 5-1-2 as it relates to the major scale, if you want to see it that way, but it's just the absolute mode numbering system. They'll be able to understand that. But if they want to see it in a scale degree system, for whatever reason, because they just play Mixolydian as a 1-4-5 or Mixolydian scale degrees all the time, for what, okay, so we're going to make the 5 the 1, and then it goes 5, 6, 7, 1, so it's 3 up. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 up, or 5 minus the 4 gets to 1. Therefore, 1 minus 4 would be the negative 3, and negative 3 plus 7 would give us 4, right? So we can convert back and forth. All right, let's go to the Aeolian. So someone says we're going to be playing an Aeolian, or the minor, A minor. So we're going to say, okay, well, if we're in A minor, I know that A is going to be the center point. I would like to find the collection of notes that it's based off of. If I know that the Aeolian is the 6, then I know that I can go up to the major, the 1, by going up 2, right? I can go up from the 6, 7, and then 1. So if I know the shape on my guitar, I can say it's 1 modal half step, 2 modal half steps to get to my major key. If I don't know that, then I can use my scale degrees or my formula to figure out the major key, to figure out the collection of notes, which once again is the same for us to make it nice and easy on this collection, but they would all move up the same pattern would remain. If I was playing in the key of G or whatever, I would just be shifted. So we're going to say, okay, well now, so that's going to be the thing. And they're going to say that now we're playing the 1-4-5. So what does the 1-4-5 mean from an absolute mode numbering system? We're going to say, well, no, that's the 6. I'm going to keep the Aeolian the 6. And then it goes 1, 2, 3 up. So we're going to say 6, 7. There's no 8 because it goes back to 1, and then 2. So then the next one, of course, will be 3 then. So the 1-4-5 Aeolian is going to be the 6, 2, 3, right? That makes sense because the 6, 2, 3 are the minors related to the major key, which is the thing that most people learn first. And the reason I think that the scale degree really took hold, or one reason, is because the Aeolian happened to work out that the 1-4-5 are all minor chords. So that's pretty cool. Like the 1-4-5 in the major are all the major chords, and the 1-4-5 in the minor, if you use a scale degree, are all the minor chords. That's cool, but the 2 is the Locrian. That's weird. And then you have to play the 3, 6, 7 to get to the major chords. That's weird, right? And it doesn't work that way in any other mode. So if you want to play in Mixolydian, Dorian, Lydian, then the 1-4-5 being major or minor no longer works. It's not like you can say, look, I'm playing in the Dorian mode, which is a minor mode, therefore the 1-4-5 is going to be the minor chords. No, wrong. They're not the minor chords if you're playing all in the same diatonic key. But if you keep the numbering system the same, then it does work through all of them, right? Like it's insane that we don't do that, right? There's like absolutely no reason to make it more complicated, other than a shibboleths thing. You're just trying to have someone jump through the hoops to see if they can jump through the hoops or whatever. I don't know. It's not, but we don't need to make people jump through the hoops. Okay. So let's say we're in Locrian. They're like, hey, dude, we're playing in Locrian. We're crazy. Some guy's been stealing all my stuff over here. They've stole my cabbage. I think he's slinging stolen cabbage in the park, man. And someone came in and was smoking some of that stolen cabbage. And they came in. They're like, we want to play in the Locrian. We're like, nobody plays in Locrian, man. He's like, yeah, but I've been smoking some stolen cabbage that some dude was slinging in the park, and I just got an epiphany that we need to be playing in like B Locrian. We need to be playing in B Locrian. We're like, all right, dude, I don't know. I think you should cross the street next time you see that guy, but let's go. We'll give it a shot. We'll give it a shot. All right, so let's say we're going to be playing in B Locrian. So we're going to say if it's the 3, then I'm sorry, it's the B. It's the 7 then, right? It's the 7. And we want to get back to the major. So that means that we can just take one step forward, one modal half step, which happens to be also one note half step forward, to see that once again, we're in the collection of notes of the key of C, and we're playing around the tonic of the 7. All right, which is weird. This guy's crazy, but that's all right. I can play in Locrian. I can be crazy too. I can be crazy too. You want to see crazy? You want to see crazy? All right. So we're gonna say so then we're gonna say if it goes to the so now the 1 is the 7. So now we're gonna say if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 3 up, right? So it goes from the 7 and it goes 1, 2, 3. So we're gonna say up by 3, or we can, and then the 4. Or we can say that the 1 goes up by 6 to get to 7, which means that the 4 plus 6 would give us 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But there's only 7 notes, so 10 minus 7 would get to 3. So it's a little bit wonky because we got to go around the horn to figure that out, but totally doable. All right, so let's go to the other side then. If we were to be saying that we want to play in the crazy Locrian, most people wouldn't know what I'm talking about because no one plays in Locrian, but we can explain it in such a way that the bandmates will understand and they can still play it even though they almost certainly don't know the scale degrees related to Locrian, right? So we could say, hey, look, we're going to be playing around the modal center, the collection of notes of the key of C, but we're going to make the 7 the modal center, which is the Locrian mode, and then we're going to be playing the 7, 3, 4 as it relates to the key of C. So even though they never play in Locrian, they could still figure it out if we explain it to them that way, whereas they can't explain it or figure it out when we explain it in the vice versa way, even if that's the way they normally use, because they would then have to remember all of the numbering systems for all 7 modes, and nobody remembers the numbering system for the Locrian mode because no one plays in it unless they've been smoking stolen cabbage from some crazy dude that's been hawking it in the park, but because he keeps stealing it from his neighbors. Anyway, so that's what I'm saying. So if we wanted to go the other way, we could say this is 7, and then we go 1, 2, 3. So if the 7 brings it back to the 1, so we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Or we can say 7 minus 6 gets us to the 1. That means 3 minus 6 would get us to the -3 plus 7, which would be the 4. All right, that's the general idea.